Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time to a place that has become a synonym for toughness, discipline, and a truly epic amount of ABS. We're heading to ancient Sparta. Now, I know what you're thinking: swords, shields, and shouting, but we're going to peek behind the military curtain and explore something a little more personal. We're going to look at what love, marriage, and family were actually like in a society that valued the state above all else. And let me give you a little spoiler: it's weird. Like, really, really weird. You might think your dating life is complicated, but trust me, the Spartans have us beat. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support means the world. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where our little community is spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background tone, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you experience isn't a warm blanket or a gentle lullaby. It's the crisp, almost sharp air of the Eurotas Valley. You've just been born. Congratulations. But don't get too excited. In Sparta, circa 450 BC, your life's journey doesn't begin with a celebration, it begins with an inspection. You are tiny, helpless, and your future is about to be decided by a committee. Your father, a man whose hands are calloused from holding a spear and shield, lifts you. His touch is firm, not necessarily unkind, but filled with a profound sense of anxiety. He isn't just looking at his newborn child, HES, looking at a potential soldier, a future citizen, or a liability. He wraps you in a simple cloth and carries you not to your mother, but out into the cool air, towards a place called the Lesche. It's a sort of public clubhouse, or portico, an open-air building where the elders of your tribe gather. Imagine a stone-floored, colonnaded space, open to the elements, where grim-faced old men sit, their bodies scarred from decades of warfare. This is your first job interview, and you haven't even learned to burp on command yet. Your father presents you to them. There's no cooing, no pinching of your cheeks. They examine you with the detached, practical eyes of a farmer inspecting livestock. They turn you over, checking your limbs, your spine, the shape of your head. They are looking for any sign of physical imperfection, any weakness that might suggest you won't grow into a strong warrior or a robust mother capable of bearing them. This is one of the most famous or infamous practices of Spartan society. The state, not the family, had the final say on whether a child was fit to be reared. If you were deemed weak or deformed, your story would end here. Your father would be instructed to leave you at a chasm on the slopes of Mount Tegetos, a place called the Agoge, or the deposits. It's a chilling concept, the ultimate expression of Spartan pragmatism. The needs of the many, the need for an unbreakable wall of warriors outweighed the life of a single, imperfect individual. Now, historians still debate the exact nature of this practice. Our main source for this, the writer Plutarch, lived centuries after the peak of Spartan power, and some scholars argue he might have exaggerated the systematic, assembly line nature of this culling. Was it really a formal, mandatory state-run program for every single baby, or was it a more informal, though still ruthless, custom reserved for obvious and severe deformities? We don't have a clear-cut answer. The Spartans weren't big on writing things down, they were a people of action, not administration. So we're left to piece together the truth from outsiders who were often both horrified and fascinated by them. But for you, in this moment, the debate is irrelevant. You feel the cold air on your skin and the heavy gaze of the elders. A silence hangs in the air, thick with your father's unspoken hope and fear. He has done his part. He has produced a child. Now, it is up to the state to grant that child the right to live. Then, one of the elders gives a short, sharp nod. That's it. No fanfare, no certificate of approval, just a silent consensus. You are fit. You have passed your first test. Your father takes you back, and you can almost feel the tension leaving his body. A small, imperceptible sigh of relief. He carries you home to your mother. She is waiting, and for the first time, you are placed in her arms. But the message is already crystal clear, absorbed into your very being before you can even form a thought. You are not hers. You are not your father's. You are a resource. You belong to Sparta. Your life has been sanctioned, approved, and from this moment forward, it will be shaped, molded, and directed to serve the state. Welcome to the world, little Spartan. The easy part is over. Your early years are surprisingly similar to those of the boys, while your brother is still at home. Before Ages carted off to his military barracks, you eat the same plain food, play the same rough games in the dusty courtyard, and feel the same sun on your skin. But as you grow, the paths diverge. While he is destined for the barracks, you, as a Spartan girl, are about to embark on a childhood that would make any other Greek woman faint from shock. Forget what you might have pictured for girls in the ancient world. You are not confined to the home, hidden away in a stuffy women's quarter, learning to weave and be silent. That's the life of an Athenian girl, your city-state's biggest rival. No, you are a daughter of Sparta. Your value to the state is measured in your physical strength, and your education reflects that. From a young age, you are enrolled in a public, state-sponsored training program. Just like the boys, you are taught to run, to wrestle, to throw the discus and the javelin. Your days are spent outdoors, under the watchful eyes of instructors. You learn to push your body to its limits. You feel the satisfying thud of your feet on the hard-packed earth of the running track, a strain in your shoulders as you hurl a bronze-tipped javelin, its leather thong unwinding as it flies. You grapple with other girls, learning balance and leverage, they feeling the grit of the earth on your back and the fierce joy of a hard-won victory. This isn't just for fun, it's your primary duty. The mythical lawgiver of Sparta, like Hergus, was believed to have decreed that a woman's body must be as strong and prepared as a man's. The logic was brutally simple. Strong parents produce strong children. A weak, coddled mother could only produce a weak, coddled son, and Sparta had no use for those. So, as your brother trains to become a killer, you train to become a vessel for future killers. It's a bit grim when you put it that way, but to you, it's a source of immense pride. You are a vital part of the great Spartan machine. And here's something that would make a visiting merchant from Corinth blush until his tunic turned red. You do all of this in public, and you do it wearing very little. The peplos, the simple tunic worn by Spartan women, is famously shortened, has a long slit up the side, earning you the nickname Phanom rides, or thigh showers, from other scandalized Greeks. Sometimes, you train completely nude, just like the boys. To you, there's nothing strange about it. Your body is a tool, a testament to your discipline and health. It's not something to be hidden in shame, it's something to be honed and displayed with pride. It's a symbol of your status and your contribution to the state. The idea of covering it up seems as absurd as a warrior polishing only one side of his shield. Your education isn't purely physical, though this is where the historical record gets a bit hazy. You are taught to read and write. You need to be literate enough to manage a household and an estate later in life, because your husband will be busy with military duties. You also learn music, song, and dance. These aren't frivolous pastimes, they are for religious festivals and choral performances that praise the gods and instill civic virtue. You learn the poems that tell of Spartan heroes and the songs that mock cowards. Your mind is being sharpened, just like your body, to serve the state. But how formal was this academic schooling? That's a question historians are still untangling. Unlike the boys' famous Agoge system, we don't have a clear blueprint for the girls' education. Was there a formal school building where you learned your letters? Or was it a more informal system, taught by older women in the community? Did you study epic poetry, or was your reading strictly practical the sources? mostly written by non-Spartans. Focus on the shocking physical part and leave the details of your intellectual life in the shadows. We know you were likely more educated and worldly than almost any other woman in Greece, but the specific curriculum is lost to time. As you reach adolescence, the purpose of all this training becomes clearer. It's not about personal achievement. There are no professional athletic careers for you. It's all a prelude to your ultimate function: marriage and childbirth. Every race you win, every meal you eat, every song you learn is an investment by the state in its own future. You are being meticulously crafted into the ideal Spartan mother: strong, healthy, intelligent, and fiercely loyal. As you stand with your friends, laughing after a dusty wrestling match, you look across the valley at the peaks of Mount Agoge. You know your destiny lies not in conquering other cities, but in creating the men who will. And in Sparta, that is the highest honor a woman can achieve. While your sister is out there becoming a Thaish hour, your own childhood is about to come to an abrupt and jarring end. The day you turn 7 is the day you say goodbye to your family. There's no big party, no sentimental farewell. One morning, a state official, a man you don't know, arrives at your home. Your mother hands you over. She doesn't cry, or at least, not where anyone can see her. Showing such emotion would be a display of weakness, a disgrace. Your father gives you a firm clap on the shoulder, a look in his eyes that is a mixture of pride and stern warning. Then you are led away. You are now a ward of the state. You are entering the Agoge, the legendary Spartan public education and training regimen that will dominate your life for the next 13 years. It's less of a school and more of a full-time military boot camp, designed to systematically strip you of your individuality and forge you into a single, unified component of the Spartan phalanx. Yori marched to a barracks with a group of other 7-year-old boys. The place is dark, functional, and smells of sweat, dust, and damp wool. There are no private rooms, no personal belongings. You will live, eat, and sleep in a herd, a pack the age lie. The older boys, teenagers who have already been hardened by the system, are your immediate superiors. They seem like giants, their casual cruelty a constant, low-level hum in the background of your new life. Your long hair, a symbol of childhood, is shorn off. Your comfortable clothes are replaced with a single, rough spun tunic, the same for winter and summer. You are expected to go barefoot, to harden your feet and make you more agile on the rocky terrain. The idea is to make you tough, to make you resilient, to make you accustomed to hardship from the very beginning. Luxury is the enemy. Comfort makes a man soft, and a soft man is a broken link in the shield wall. The food is, well, basic is a generous word. It's intentionally kept to a minimum, just enough to sustain you but never enough to make you feel full. You are constantly hungry. This isn't just a matter of resource scarcity, it's a deliberate training tool. You are encouraged to steal food to supplement your meager rations. It's a test of your cunning, your stealth, and your daring. But there's a catch. A very Spartan catch: the crime isn't stealing, the crime is getting caught. If you are caught, you are punished severely, not for the theft itself, but for your incompetence. This teaches you to be sly and resourceful, skills that will one day be useful on a campaign, scouting an enemy camp. One of the most bizarre things you have to learn is a whole new way of speaking. Forget long, eloquent sentences. You are taught to be laconic, named after Laconia, the region Sparta is in. You must speak only when necessary, and when you do, your words must be brief, witty, and straight to the point. A long-winded answer is seen as a sign of a cluttered and disciplined mind. It's a skill you practice constantly. An instructor might ask you a complex question, and you are expected to give a pithy, perfect reply. Failure results in punishment, often a sharp bite on the thumb from the instructor. And the punishments are constant. The Agoge operates on a principle of brutal discipline. You are whipped for infractions, for showing fear, for any sign of weakness. This is meant to build up your tolerance for pain, to teach you to endure without complaint. The idea is that if you can withstand a flogging in the barracks, you will not flinch from an enemy spear on the battlefield. Historians still puzzle over the psychological effects of such an upbringing. How much of this system was about genuine military training versus a form of ritualized hazing designed to bind the group together through shared trauma? The Roman historian Xenophon, an admirer of Sparta, painted it as a logical, effective system for producing ideal soldiers, but others, like Aristotle, were more critical, suggesting that the process made the Spartans animalistic and brutal, successful in war but incapable of living well in times of peace. He argued that the Agoge treated boys like animals, and so they became like them. In your first few weeks, the homesickness is a physical ache. You miss your mother's presence, the familiar layout of your home, the simple freedom of being a child. But you learn quickly to bury it. Crying gets you a beating. Complaining gets you mocked. So you harden yourself. You learn to watch, to anticipate, to move with the pack. You learn that your survival and your standing depend not on your family name, but on your toughness and your ability to earn the respect of your peers and the older boys. You are being systematically broken down, your childhood identity erased, so that a new one can be built in its place. Spartan, you are no longer a son. You are a soldier in training, and the training has only just begun. The years blur into a relentless cycle of training and hardship. As you move from a small boy into your teenage years, the intensity of the Agoge ramps up. You are no longer just learning to endure, you are being actively shaped into a weapon. Your days are a grueling routine of physical conditioning. You run obstacle courses in the rugged hills surrounding Sparta, your bare feet growing tougher with every sharp stone. You practice with spears and short swords, the movements becoming second nature, an extension of your body. Wrestling is a daily ritual, a constant struggle for dominance that teaches you pain, leverage, and how to read an opponent's body. But the training isn't just physical, it's deeply psychological. You participate in ritualistic events designed to test your courage to its absolute limit. The most notorious of these takes place at the sanctuary of Artemis or Thea. Here, young men like you are brought to the altar and flogged, sometimes for hours. It's a contest of endurance. The goal is not to cry out, not to show any sign of pain. It's a public spectacle, with your family and other citizens watching. To endure the lashes in silence is to win immense honor. To falter is to bring shame upon yourself. It's a brutal, almost incomprehensible rite of passage, turning pain into a performance of civic virtue. It is during this time, as an adolescent, that you are introduced to one of the most complex and debated aspects of Spartan society: institutionalized pederasty. Each teenage boy in the Agoge is expected to have an older male mentor, usually a young warrior in his 20s. This man is your Aristoteles, your lover or admirer, and you are his aites, the one being pursued. Now, this is where our modern sensibilities get a major workout. This relationship was a cornerstone of your education. Your mentor was responsible for your moral and military development. He was your role model, your sponsor, your personal drill sergeant. He would push you, praise you, and punish you. He was expected to mold you into the ideal Spartan man. Your success or failure was a direct reflection on him. If you showed cowardice, he would be the one fined or disgraced by the state. The bond between you is incredibly intense, forged in the crucible of the barracks. It's a relationship of deep loyalty, respect, and, according to most ancient sources, an erotic component. This wasn't seen as a private matter, but as a public institution, a fundamental part of the military system. The idea was that soldiers who shared such a profound bond would fight more fiercely side by side, unwilling to show weakness or abandon their partner in battle. The famous Sacred Band of Thebes, an elite unit of 150 male couples, was said to have been inspired by this Spartan model. The exact nature of the physical relationship is, of course, a hot topic of academic debate. How explicitly sexual was it? The philosopher Xenophon, who knew the Spartans well, claimed the relationship was purely platonic, a noble bond focused on education and virtue, and that any physical expression was strictly forbidden and considered shameful. However, other writers like Plato and the Athenian playwrights suggest a very different picture, one where an erotic element was openly acknowledged and accepted. Some scholars argue Xenophon was trying to clean up Sparta's image for a more conservative Athenian audience. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, and it probably varied from couple to couple. What was considered acceptable was likely bound by unwritten rules and social conventions that are now lost to us. For you, this relationship is the most important one in your life. This man is your guide through the treacherous social landscape of the Agoge. He teaches you the unwritten rules, protects you from bullies while also being your primary tormentor, and advocates for you among the adult warriors. He is the first person to see you as an individual, just single you out from the herd. The loyalty you feel towards him is absolute. You would rather die than disappoint him. You learn to fight not just for Sparta, but for his approval. This ment or apprentice system, this intense brotherhood, is the glue that holds the Spartan phalanx together. It's in the shared hardship, the secret jokes, the whispered encouragement before a brutal training exercise, and the silent understanding that passes between you and your mentor. You are learning that the most important family you will ever have is not the one you were born into, but the one forged in the barracks. It's a bond of steel, tempered in pain and discipline, a relationship that defines your youth and shapes the man you are becoming. You've survived. You've endured the hunger, the beatings, and the relentless psychological pressure. At the age of 20, you officially graduate from the Agoge. The shorn head of your boyhood is gone. You now wear your hair long, a distinctive mark of a full-blooded Spartan warrior. You are a trained killing machine, proficient with the spear and the shield. Your mind and body honed to a razor's edge by 13 years of brutal conditioning. You might think the worst is over, that you finally made it, but in reality, your life is just beginning its next, and in some ways, more difficult phase. Graduating from the Agoge makes you a soldier, but it does not automatically make you a full citizen. To achieve that, you must be accepted into a SYS Sidian or Phididian, which is essentially a military mess hall or dining club. Think of it as the most exclusive fraternity in the ancient world, and getting in is your final exam. These clubs are the heart and soul of Spartan male society. Each one consists of about 15 men who will eat, drink, and fight together for the rest of their active lives. This is your new family. The bonds forged here are considered more important than those with your actual wife and children. Membership is for life, and it's not optional. To be a citizen with political rights a homo ios, one of the similar S or peers, you must be a member of a SYS Sidian. The admission process is nerve-wracking. You are a candidate, a hopeful pledge. The existing members of the club you've been nominated to will vote on your admission, and the vote is secret and must be unanimous. It's a quiet, solemn ritual. Each member takes a small piece of bread, like a little dough, and walks past a vessel. They cast their vote by either dropping the bread in as is, or by squeezing it flat in their hand first. The flattened piece of bread is a no vote. Even one single flattened piece of bread, just one veto, and your application is rejected. You are blackballed. The pressure is immense. Your entire life has led to this moment. All your training, all the pain you've endured, all the honor you've tried to accumulate, it can all be undone by one man in that room who, for whatever reason, doesn't like you. Maybe you were too arrogant in training. Maybe you flinched one too many times during a flogging. Maybe he just doesn't like the way you carry your shield. The reason doesn't matter. A single rejection means you fail. If you are rejected, the consequences are catastrophic. You become a social outcast, a hypomyond, or inferior. you are still expected to fight for Sparta. But you lose your political rights and are subject to constant humiliation. You would be forced to wear special clothing to mark your shame, and you'd be shunned in public. For a Spartan, whose entire identity is built on honor and status, it's a fate worse than death. But you've been groomed for this. Your mentor from the Agoge has likely sponsored you, vouching for your character. You've learned to be brave but not reckless, confident but not arrogant. The vote is cast, the vessel is checked, no flattened bread. You are in. A wave of relief, so profound it's almost sickening, washes over you. You have been accepted. You are now, officially, one of the peers. Now comes the hard part: maintaining your membership. Each member of the SYS Citian is required to contribute a specific amount of food and drink from his own estate each month. This includes barley, wine, cheese, figs, and a small amount of money for meat or fish. This brings us to a fascinating and often overlooked aspect of Spartan equality, the homo-ioio-ioe. The peers were only similar as long as they could afford this monthly contribution. Your family was granted a plot of land, the helots, which was worked by state-owned slaves. The helots, the produce from this land, was meant to cover your mess hall dues. But what if you had a bad harvest, or if your land was less fertile than your neighbors, or if you simply managed your estate poorly? If you failed to make your monthly contribution, you would be kicked out of the SYS Citian. You would lose your citizenship and become an inferior, just as if you'd been blackballed in the first place. Historians are still debating the long-term effects of this system. Some argue that this economic pressure was a major factor in the gradual decline of Sparta as citizen body, as more and more families lost their land and status over the generations. It was a system of enforced equality that paradoxically created a constant threat of economic ruin and social death. So, at 20 years old, you are a full-fledged warrior citizen. You have a seat at the table, but it's a precarious seat. Your life is now a constant balancing act, maintaining your military prowess, upholding your honor, and managing your estate to ensure you can literally afford your citizenship. You've graduated into a world of even higher stakes. The daily whippings of the Agoge might seem simple in comparison. Your life now revolves around two key locations: the training ground and the dining hall of your SYS Citian. The latter, the Phydidian, is where you will spend almost every evening for the next decade. Forget cozy family dinners at home. Home is a place you barely know. This austere, functional hall is your real home. You walk in as the sun sets. The room is plain, furnished with simple wooden benches and tables. There are no lavish decorations, no opulent displays of wealth. Austerity is the law. The men are already gathering. Your 15 or so messmates. They are men of all ages, from new graduates like yourself to grizzled veterans in their 50s. This is the foundation of the Spartan phalanx, not just a dining club. Here, the generations mix, and the values of the state are reinforced every single night. You take your seat. The conversation is, of course, laconic. It's sharp, witty, and often brutal. Young men like you are expected to endure easing, unpointed questions from the elders. It's a continuation of your education, teaching you to think on your feet and to take a verbal jab without flinching. They might ask you about a tactical decision you made in training or quiz you on a point of law. Your answer is judged by all. A clever response earns nods of approval. A foolish one brings on a barrage of mockery. The main course arrives. It's the legendary Spartan black broth, the melis tsiomos. Let's be honest, it sounds disgusting. Its core ingredients were boiled pig's blood, pork, salt, and vinegar. The story goes that a man from Sparta, a Greek city famous for its luxury, once tasted the broth and said, "Now I understand why the Spartans do not fear death." It was infamous throughout Greece for being foul. But for you, it's just dinner. It's nourishing, it's hot, and it's what you've always known. It's the taste of discipline itself, along with the breath, There are the staples you and your messmates contributed: barley bread, a little cheese, and some figs for dessert. Wine is served, but it's mixed with plenty of water. Drunkenness is considered a disgraceful loss of self-control. To drive this point home, the helots, the state-owned slaves, would sometimes be forced to drink undiluted wine and then be paraded through the hall as a living lesson in what not to become. It's a chilling piece of social engineering, using the humiliation of one group to discipline another. One of the oddest little details of the S3X Scythian is the cup of display. According to some ancient accounts, each mess hall had a special cup that an elder would point to before the drinking began. He would warn everyone, wine goes no further than this. It was a visual reminder of moderation. Historians still discuss the specifics of this. Was it a literal cup that no one was allowed to drain past a certain point? Or was it a more symbolic gesture regardless? It speaks volumes about the Spartan obsession with self-control, even in what should be a moment of relaxation. The evening is not just about eating and drinking. It's about politics, gossip, and reinforcement of the warrior code. The elders recount tales of past battles, dissecting tactics and praising heroes. They discuss matters of state. Listening to them is how you learn to be a citizen. You learn who is honorable, and who is to be watched with suspicion. It's here that the collective will of the Spartan elite is forged. In this room, over bowls of black broth, there's no leaving early. You're expected to stay until the end of the evening's proceedings. Only then can you head back to the barracks where you still live. Notice I said barracks. At home, even if you get married during this period and you are expected to, you don't get to live with your wife. You continue to live with your messmates until you are 30. The S3X Scythian is your primary family. Your loyalty is to these men first. Everything else is secondary. As you walk back under the stars, the cool Laconian air on your face, you feel a sense of belonging that is absolute. You are part of an unbreakable unit. These men, your messmates, are the men who will stand next to you in the shield wall. You trust them with your life, and they trust you with theirs. This nightly ritual, the simple food, the sharp banter, the shared experience is what transforms a group of individual soldiers into the most feared fighting force in the ancient world. It's the secret ingredient, more powerful than any black broth. You're in your mid-20s now. You've settled into the rhythm of a full-time warrior's life. You are at your physical peak, a seasoned soldier and an established member of your dining club. The state has invested decades in you, and now it's time for you to fulfill your next, and perhaps most important, duty: producing the next generation of soldiers. It's time to get married. But in Sparta, you don't court a girl. You don't send her love poems or woo her with gifts. The Spartan approach to marriage is, like everything else, a practical, state-driven affair that looks more like a special forces operation than a romance. The process begins with selecting a bride. This isn't entirely your choice. Your family, and likely the elders of your tribe, have a significant say. The ideal bride is a reflection of the ideal you: strong, healthy, and from a good family. Remember your sister and her friends. The thigh showers, training in the open, this is where their education pays off. A girl's reputation for athletic prowess and robust health is her primary asset. You are looking for a partner who has proven she is capable of bearing strong children. Her wit and intelligence are also valued. Shall be running your entire estate. After all, but her physical fitness is paramount. Let's say a suitable match has been identified. You've seen her at festivals, perhaps competing in a race. You've made your intentions known through intermediaries, your family speaking to her family. There's a negotiation, a settlement of the dowry, all handled by your elders. Once an agreement is reached, you prepare for the wedding. And this is where things get truly bizarre. The Spartan wedding is a ritualized abduction. There's no public ceremony, no feast with family and friends, no exchange of vows in a temple. The whole affair is conducted under the cover of darkness, cloaked in secrecy. On the appointed night, You will go to the home of your bride's family and, essentially, kidnap her. This isn't a violent or non-consensual act in the modern sense. It's a pre-arranged, unexpected ritual. You snatch her away from her female companions and carry her off. The whole performance is meant to be forceful and decisive. It's a symbolic display of your masculine strength. A warrior taking what is his. It strips the event of any sentimentality and frames it as an act of conquest, not a union of love. You take her not to your own home. You don't have one yet, but to a designated house, perhaps one belonging to a female relative. There, she is prepared for the wedding night by a bridesmaid, or nymphocomoes. This preparation is another strange piece of Spartan theater. Your bride's head is shaved, just as yours was when you entered the Agoge. She is then dressed in a man's cloak and sandals and left alone in a dark room, lying on a simple pallet on the floor. Why the shaved head in the men's clothing? Historians have been scratching their heads over this for centuries. One theory is that it was meant to ease the transition for the young Spartan man. Remember, you have spent your entire life exclusively in a male environment. Your emotional, and possibly physical attachments have been with other men. Some scholars argue that making the bride appear more boyish, more familiar, was a way to bridge this psychological gap and make the first heterosexual encounter less intimidating. Another theory suggests it was a rite of passage, symbolizing the bride leaving behind her girlhood and entering a new, more masculine role as the head of a household. It's one of those classic academics are still fiercely debating this moments. So, there she is, waiting in the dark. And now, it's your turn to be sneaky. You must slip away from your barracks, avoiding the notice of your messmates and superiors. You are a grown man, a famed warrior, yet you are sneaking around in the dead of night, like a teenager breaking curfew. You make your way to the house, find the darkened room, and consummate the marriage. You don't stay the night. You don't wake up with your new wife. After the encounter, you must quietly get up, get dressed, and sneak back to the barracks to sleep with your comrades. As if nothing has happened, you must be back in your place before morning roll call. To be caught would be a mark of indiscipline, of being uxorious or too controlled by your wife, a serious insult in Spartan culture. This is your wedding, a kidnapping, a secret rendezvous, and a stealthy retreat. It sets the tone for the first years of your marriage, a clandestine affair. Secondary to your duties as a soldier and your bonds with the men of your S3X city. You are a husband now, but you are a Spartan warrior first. The day after your wedding, you wake up in the barracks. Nothing has changed. You go through the same drills, eat the same black broth, and share the same rough jokes with your messmates. Your marriage is a secret, at least officially. Of course, everyone probably knows. Sparta is a small, insular society, but the fiction must be maintained. To speak of your wife, to show any sign of longing or affection, would be unmanly. It would suggest that your focus has shifted from the state to your private life, which is a cardinal sin. Your bride, meanwhile, is in a similar state of limbo. After that first night, her shaved head begins to grow out. She returns to her family's home, but she is now a married woman. She holds a new status, but her life has drastically changed either. She's no longer a girl, but not yet the full mistress of her own household. She is in a liminal state, waiting, and she's not the only one. Your new wife has her own circle of friends, the women she grew up and trained with. She returns to them, but the dynamic has shifted. The central figure in her wedding night preparation, aside from you, was her bridesmaid, the nymphocomoes. This bride attendant was not just a helper, she was a crucial guide, often an older, respected woman who was already married and a mother. She was the one who orchestrated the entire event. She coordinated the timing with your intermediaries, oversaw your bride's strange transformation, the shaved head. The man's cloak, and gave her advice and reassurance. This bridesmaid's role highlights the powerful female networks that existed in Sparta. While the men were off living their communal military life, the women formed their own society with its own hierarchies and rituals. The nymphocomawes was a figure of authority and knowledge, passing down the unwritten rules of Spartan womanhood from one generation to the next. Let's revisit that bizarre bridal preparation for a moment. The shaved head, the male attire, left alone on a pallet in a dark room. This entire setup is so counterintuitive to our idea of a wedding night. A really fascinating, though less common, theory about this ritual connects it to Spartan pragmatism about procreation. The darkness, the unfamiliarity, the almost sterile environment, it stripped the act of anything remotely romantic or pleasurable. It reduced the first marital encounter to its most basic, biological function conception. The state needed babies, and this ritual, in its own strange way, was designed to get straight to the point without any distracting emotional clutter. Historians are still trying to figure out what the emotional reality was for the young couple. Did you feel anything for this woman you were now bound to? Was there excitement, fear, or was it just another duty to be performed? Like guard duty or weapon maintenance, the sources, written by men for men, are silent on the bride's perspective. We can only imagine her experience the strangeness of the ritual, the anticipation, the encounter with a man she barely knew. A man who smelled of the barracks and whose life was a world away from her own. For you, this first encounter is just the beginning of a very strange married life. You are now a husband, but your primary residence is still the barracks. You are not allowed to live with your wife until you turn 30 and retire from frontline military service. So, for the better part of a decade, your marriage will consist of a series of nocturnal visits. You must continue to sneak out of the barracks at night, make your way to her family's home, or wherever she is staying, and spend a short time with her before slipping back to your bed before dawn. It's a life of subterfuge. Your relationship with your wife is, by design, an illicit affair. The official justification for this, according to ancient writers like Plutarch, was that it kept the passion alive by making access to your wife difficult and infrequent. It was thought that you would desire her more, and that these brief, stolen encounters would be more fervent and, therefore, more likely to result in strong children. It was also meant to ensure that you didn't expend your energy on domestic life, keeping you sharp and focused on your military duties. It's a very Spartan kind of logic. The best way to strengthen a marriage is to keep the couple apart. Whether this actually worked, or if it just created a society of emotionally distant husbands and wives, is a question we can only speculate on. But for now, this is your reality. You are married, but you live like a bachelor, and your family life is a secret you carry in the dark. The years pass in this strange rhythm of public duty and private secrecy. By day, you are a soldier, indistinguishable from your brothers in arms. By night, you are a phantom husband, tiptoeing through the quiet streets of Sparta for a fleeting encounter with your wife. This period of your life, from your wedding until you turn 30, is a masterclass in comportementsnetlisnie. Your life is a paradox. You are married, but you are effectively single. You might even have a child or two. Children you barely know. You might hear news of your son's birth while on morning drill. You might see your daughter for the first time during a brief, stolen visit. Your role as a father is, at this stage, almost entirely abstract. You are the genetic source, the provider of the sea, but you are not a presence in the home. Your children are being raised by your wife and the wider community of women. They will grow up seeing their father as a visitor in the night, a figure more myth than man. This system of marital separation is one of the most defining features of Spartan society. Its purpose was to prevent the softening influence of domestic life. A comfortable home, a loving wife, the daily joys of fatherhood, all these were seen as distractions that could dull a warrior's edge. The state needed you to be hard, and the primary way to ensure that was to deny you the comforts of a normal family life. Your loyalty could not be divided. Your messmates in the SYS city and were your family, the state was your household. This forced separation had a profound impact on the power dynamics within the marriage. While you are away, living in the barracks, who is managing your estate? The Kale Arrows that pays for your citizenship your wife is. She is the one overseeing the helot workforce, making decisions about planting and harvesting, managing the finances, and ensuring that your monthly contribution to the mess hall is delivered without fail. If she fails, you lose your status. Your citizenship rests squarely on her shoulders. This makes Spartan women incredibly powerful, not just within the home, but in the economic fabric of the state. Here's a quirky little detail that underscores this separation. Plutarch tells a story of a Spartan man who had been married for years and had several children, yet had never seen his wife in the daylight. This is almost certainly an exaggeration, a way of emphasizing the extremity of the custom. You would certainly see your wife at public events, like religious festivals or the athletic contests where she once competed. But the story captures a fundamental truth: your relationship was primarily nocturnal and clandestine. The intimate, day-to-day partnership that other Greeks might associate with marriage simply did not exist for you. Of course, the whole sneaking out business becomes something of an open secret. Can you really fool a group of hyper-aware elite soldiers that you share a room with every single night? Probably not. It's likely that it evolved into a kind of ritualized game. Your messmates might pretend not to notice you slipping out, playing along with the charade because it was part of the system. To acknowledge it openly would be to break the rules, but to ignore it was to allow the system to function. This brings us to another one of those historical debates: how strict was this rule? Really, was it an ironclad law that every single Spartan followed for 10 years? Or was it an ideal that was more flexible in practice? Some historians suggest that as men got older, closer to the age of 30, the rules might have been relaxed. Perhaps the sneaking out became less sneaky and more of a routine. We lack the detailed personal accounts to know for sure. The Spartans left us no diaries detailing the frustrations or absurdities of their married lives. We only have the official, state-approved version of the story, as told by outsiders. So, you live this double life. You project an image of stoic indifference to domesticity, a man wholly consumed by his military calling. But in the quiet of the night, you seek out a connection that is forbidden by the very culture that defines you. It's a strange, lonely existence. You are a husband who doesn't live at home, a father who doesn't raise his own children. You are caught between two worlds: this dark, masculine world of the barracks and the secret, feminine world of your home, and you must navigate this divide in silence, under the cover of darkness, for a full decade of your life. The ultimate purpose of your clandestine marriage, the whole point of the state-mandated matchmaking and the nocturnal visits, is procreation. In Sparta, having children isn't a personal joy or a private family decision. It is your most sacred public duty. You are not just creating a family, you are manufacturing raw materials for the Spartan state. Your wife is the factory, and you are the key operator. It's a cold, pragmatic view, but it's the very foundation of your society. When your wife becomes pregnant, it is a moment of quiet triumph. It means the system is working. It means you have both fulfilled your primary function. But the anxiety that surrounded your own birth now repeats itself for your child. The 9 months of pregnancy are a period of waiting, not just for a baby, but for a verdict. Your wife continues her active lifestyle during her pregnancy. There is no sense of her being delicate or fragile. The Spartan belief was that an active mother would have an easier birth and a stronger child. She continues to manage the estate and participate in the life of the community. Her pregnancy is a public affair, a visible sign of her service to Sparta. When the child is born, the first person to assess it is probably the midwife or the women of the household. But the final judgment, as it was for you, rests with the state. Your father-in-law, or perhaps you yourself if you can get away, will take the newborn to the lesche to be inspected by the Council of Elders. The same scene that began your own life now plays out for your offspring. The same grim-faced man, the same dispassionate assessment, the same life or death decision. If the child is a boy and is deemed fit, there is a sense of profound, communal success. You have produced a future hoplite, a new link in the shield wall. This is the highest achievement the Spartan man can aspire to. Your status and honor are enhanced. You have paid your debt to the state in the most valuable currency imaginable, a new warrior. If the child is a girl and is deemed fit, this is also a cause for celebration. You have produced a future mother of warriors. She will be raised to be strong and disciplined, ready to one day take her place in the great project of Spartan eugenics. A healthy daughter is an investment in the future strength of the city. The famous Spartan attitude towards childbirth is encapsulated in a quote attributed to Gorgo, the wife of King Leonidas. When asked by a foreign woman why Spartan women were the only women in the world who could rule men, she supposedly replied, "Because we are the only women who give birth to men." This wasn't just a clever retort, it was a profound statement of identity. A Spartan woman's worth was intrinsically linked to her ability to produce true Spartan men, tough, brave, and utterly devoted to the state. But what if you and your wife are unable to conceive in a society so laser-focused on procreation? Infertility was not just a personal tragedy, it was a civic failure. It meant you were not fulfilling your duty. A childless man was viewed with a certain level of pity and contempt. There were even laws that supposedly punished bachelors or men who married late. According to some sources, unmarried men could be publicly shamed, forced to march naked around the marketplace in the middle of winter, singing a song about how they were being justly punished for disobeying the laws. This brings us to a little-known and rather strange custom related to honoring the dead. In Sparta, you did not get a named gravestone unless you died in a very specific way. For men, only one thing earned you, that honor, dying in battle. For women, there was also only one path to a named grave: dying in childbirth. This fact speaks volumes. It elevates the act of giving birth to the same level of heroic sacrifice as dying for Sparta on the field of battle. It was the female equivalent of a warrior's death, a fatal wounds, stained in service to the state. Historians still marvel at this parallel, as it grants a level of honor and status to the female experience that was unheard of in the rest of the Greek world. It was a clear statement: creating life for Sparta was as noble as taking lives for Sparta. So, as you continue your nocturnal visits, you are acutely aware of the stakes. Each encounter is a roll of the dice, a chance to fulfill your destiny. The birth of a healthy child solidifies your place in society, proves your worth, and contributes to the long-term survival of your city. It is the core of your existence. The reason you were born, the reason you were reigned, and the reason you were married. In the grand, impersonal machine of Sparta, you are a vital cog, and your children are the product of your labor. Let's imagine a difficult scenario. Years have passed. You and your wife have followed all the rules. You've performed your nocturnal duties diligently, but there are no children in any society. This would be a source of private grief. But in Sparta, it's a public problem. Your failure to procreate is a failure to serve the state. Your killed arrows, your plot of land, is meant to support warrior and his family. If there's no family, the land is being used inefficiently. The state is losing out on a future soldier. So, what happens next in Athens or Corinth? You might consider divorce, or perhaps adopt an heir. But Sparta, ever the pragmatist, had a much more direct and, to our eyes, shocking solution. The concept of romantic love and exclusive monogamy as the foundation of marriage was, to put it mildly, not a Spartan priority. The goal was producing healthy citizens, and the marriage contract was a means to that end. If the contract wasn't yielding the desired results, the Spartans were open to creative amendments. If a husband was old and his young wife was still in her childbearing years, it was considered perfectly acceptable, even commendable, for him to invite a younger, more vigorous Spartan man to father a child with her. The older husband would select a man he admired for his physical and moral qualities, a proven warrior, a man of honor. This wasn't a shameful secret, it was a sensible arrangement. The child born from this union would be considered the legal heir of the older husband, inheriting his name and his property. The biological father had no claim. It was a form of surrogate fatherhood, designed to ensure the family line continued and, more importantly, that a prime-age woman's womb did not go to waste. The reverse was also true, and perhaps even more common. If a man wanted more children than his own wife could produce, or if he simply wanted to sow his seed in a particularly impressive field, he could seek permission to have a child with another man's wife. The key here is that this was all done out in the open, with the consent of the other husband. It was a transaction between men. A man who had a beautiful and fertile wife might be approached by other citizens who wished to have children with her. To deny them was seen as selfish and petty, a sign of jealousy, a deeply un-Spartan emotion. Sharing one's wife for the purpose of procreation was seen as a generous act of public service. This practice, which some modern scholars call wife sharing, is one of the things that most baffled other Greeks. To them, it seemed to fly in the face of all notions of marital fidelity and family honor. But the Spartans didn't see it that way. For them, children were not private property. They were assets of the state. A woman's reproductive capacity was also, to some extent, a communal resource. This is illustrated by a famous story about a Spartan king, Thenaxandrid. He was married to a woman he loved, but she was barren. The Epihors, the powerful elected officials of Sparta, ordered him to set her aside and take another wife to produce an heir for the kingdom. Anaxandrid refused to divorce his first wife, so a compromise was reached: he would take a second wife while remaining married to the first. It was a rare case of bigamy, a special exception made because the stability of the state was on the line. As it turned out, his second wife gave birth to the future king Clemen's Eye, and then, miraculously, his first wife also conceived and gave birth to Dorias, a famous Spartan prince. This highlights the core principle: the needs of the state trump all personal feelings and conventions. The question of who the biological father was mattered far less than the quality of the child produced. It was a system of state-controlled eugenics, where the best men were encouraged to breed with the best women, regardless of who was married to whom. Of course, the emotional reality for the people involved is a complete mystery, another area where historians can only speculate. How did a wife feel being loaned out to another man? Did her husband feel a pang of jealousy? No matter how much the state discouraged it, did the biological father feel no connection to the child? He could never claim. The Spartan emphasis on suppressing personal emotion means we have no records of these feelings. The official line was that everyone was happy to do their part for the good of Sparta. The private reality was likely far more complex. This system, so alien to us, was the Spartan solution to a biological problem. It was practical, it was efficient, and it was utterly devoid of sentiment. It shows, perhaps more clearly than anything else, that, in Sparta, your body, your marriage, and your children did not truly belong to you. They were all on loan from the state, to be used and allocated in whatever way was deemed most beneficial to the survival of the city. While you are off living your Spartan intended life in the barracks, your wife is wielding a level of power and autonomy that would be unthinkable anywhere else in the Greek world. In Athens, a respectable woman was expected to be invisible, confined to the women's quarters of her home, her life dictated by her male guardian. Or, Kyrios, that in Sparta, your wife is a landowner, a manager, and a force to be reckoned with. The source of her power is the Kale Eros, your ancestral plot of land. Since you are forbidden from engaging in any kind of agriculture or commerce, such things were considered beneath a warrior, and since you are living communally with your messmates, she is the de facto master of the estate. She directs the helots who work the land, manages the household budget, and ensures the crops are harvested and stored. As we've seen, her efficient management is literally what keeps you in the elite citizen class. If she messes up, you're out. This economic responsibility gives her enormous leverage. Spartan women were famous throughout Greece for their wealth, particularly their ownership of land. Unlike in other city-states, Spartan women could inherit property from their fathers, and they were also entitled to a dowry that remained their own property throughout the marriage. Over time, this led to a massive concentration of wealth in female hands. By the time of Aristotle in the 4th century BC, he observed with some disapproval that women owned as much as 2/5 of all the land in Sparta. He blamed this for Sparta's decline, arguing that a gynecogratia, or rule by women, was unnatural and led to a love of luxury that corrupted the state's austere values. Whether or not it led to their decline is a point historians love to argue about, but the fact of their economic power is undisputed. A Spartan woman wasn't just managing her husband's property, she often had significant property of her own. This gave her a level of independence that was simply unheard of. She could negotiate, she could make deals. She was a player in the economic life of the city. Beyond economics, your wife enjoys a social freedom that would scandalize an Athenian. She can move about the city freely. She socializes with her friends, attends religious festivals, and watches the public athletic contests, sometimes even participating in them, as she did in her youth. She is not veiled or hidden away. She is a visible and vocal presence in society. This leads us to their famous outspokenness. Spartan women were known for their sharp, laconic wit. Just like the men, they were educated, they were informed, and they were not afraid to speak their minds, even to their husbands. The story of Gorgo, who we mentioned earlier, telling the foreign woman that Spartans rule men because they give birth to men, is a perfect example. It's confident, it's clever, and it asserts her own importance. Another story tells of a Spartan mother handing her son his shield as he goes off to war, with the famous line "Return with it," or on it, reading, "Come back victorious carrying your shield, or come back dead," carried upon it as a makeshift stretcherius. There was no third option. This demonstrates the fierce, almost terrifying devotion to the state that was instilled in women as much as in men. This outspokenness could even touch on the most sensitive of subjects. There's a curious little anecdote about how Spartan women would enforce military discipline from the sidelines. If a unit of young men was training poorly or showing a lack of spirit, a group of married women might threaten to go home and conceive children by other men. Since their husbands were clearly not the heroic stock they thought they were. Can you imagine the sheer audacity? It was a cutting remark, a verbal slap in the face, using their own reproductive power as a tool to shame men into being better warriors. But how deep did this power really run? This is where the debate lies. While they had immense economic power and social freedom, Spartan women had no formal political role. They could not vote, they could not hold office, they could not speak in the assembly. Their influence was indirect, exercised through their husbands and sons. Was their power real, or was it a carefully constructed illusion, giving them control over the domestic and economic spheres to ensure their buy into a system that ultimately served a patriarchal military state? Scholars are divided. Some see them as the most liberated women of the ancient world, while others argue they were simply cogs in the machine, given just enough power to make them effective managers of the state's primary resource, the land that fed the army. For you, the reality is simple. When you finally move home at age 30, you are entering a household that has been run by your wife for a decade. She knows its rhythms, its finances, its people. You are, in many ways, the guest in her domain. Your authority is in the public sphere, in the assembly and on the battlefield. But at home, she is the one in charge, and woe betide the Spartan man who forgot that. While you are navigating your unconventional marriage, The very top of Spartan society is dealing with its own unique and oft unmessy domestic situations. Sparta is not a typical monarchy. It's a diarchy, meaning it has two kings simultaneously. From two different royal families, the AGI adds on the Eurypontids. This system is ancient and its origins are shrouded in myth. The Spartans themselves believe the two lines descended from twin sons of a legendary hero. Whatever the origin, it created a fascinating system of checks and balances. The two kings were not equals in power at all times. One might have more influence or prestige than the other, but neither could become an absolute tyrant because the other was always there, a rival and a check on his power. This dual kingship had major implications for royal marriages and succession. A normal Spartan man like you needed to produce an heir to inherit his Kale Eros. A king needed to produce an heir to secure his entire dynasty. The pressure was immense, and it led to some of the most famous marital dramas in Spartan history. Remember the story of King Anaxandrides II, who was forced to take a second wife because his first was barren. That was a direct result of the diarchy. The EP horse and the Council of Elders couldn't risk one of the royal lines dying out. If his AGI line failed, it would create a massive power vacuum and potentially destabilize the entire state. The continuity of both royal houses was paramount. So, personal feelings and marital norms were cast aside for the good of the state. Then there is the infamous story of King Ariston, one of Anaxandrides' predecessors. Ariston was married to a woman he reportedly found unattractive and had no children with her. However, he became infatuated with the wife of his best friend, a man named Agoge. This woman was said to be the most beautiful woman in all of Sparta. So, Ariston devised a trick. He made a pact with Agoge that they would each give the other whatever he most desired from his own possessions. Agoge, thinking of gold or fine horses, readily agreed. Ariston then demanded Agoge's wife. Trapped by his oath, Agoge had to comply. Ariston divorced his own wife and married his friends. Soon after, she gave birth to a son, Diamaritus, but the timing was suspicious. Ariston, perhaps in a moment of doubt or foolishness, was sitting with the EP horse when the news of the birth was brought to him. He counted the months on his fingers and declared out loud that the child couldn't possibly be his. It was a terrible mistake. Although he later acknowledged the boy as his son and heir, the doubt had been publicly sown. Years later, Demaratus, rival for the other kingship, Clemens I, the son of the bigamous Anaxandrides, used this old story to challenge Demaratus' legitimacy. He bribed the oracle at Delphi to declare that Diamaritus was not Ariston's son. Diamaritus was deposed and fled to Persia, eventually advising the Persian king Xerxes during his invasion of Greece. A moment of royal marital drama and a careless comment ended up having massive geopolitical consequences. These stories show that while Spartan kings were subject to the same pressures to procreate as everyone else, their position also gave them certain privileges. The wife-sharing custom we discussed earlier, it seems to have applied to the kings as well. A famous example involves a man named Alcibiades, a flamboyant and controversial Athenian general who was exiled and sought refuge in Sparta. While there, he allegedly had an affair with the wife of the Eurypontid king, Agoge I, who was away on a long military campaign. The queen, Timea, gave birth to a son, and it was widely whispered that Alcibiades was the father. Alcibiades himself supposedly bragged that he had seduced the queen so that his own descendants might one day rule Sparta. Whether this affair actually happened is another one of those historical hot potatoes. Was it a real scandal, or was it propaganda cooked up by Aegis's enemies to discredit his heir? The historian Thucydides reports it as fact. But he was an Athenian and no friend to Sparta. What we do know is that when Aegis was on his deathbed, he initially disowned the boy, Leotychidas, but then, under pressure, relented and acknowledged him. However, after Aegis's death, the boy's legitimacy was challenged by Aegis's ambitious half-brother, Agesilaus, who used the old rumor to seize the throne for himself. Agesilaus went on to become one of Sparta's greatest kings. Once again, a question of paternity and marital fidelity at the highest level changed the course of Spartan history. These royal sagas, full of passion, trickery, and political maneuvering, stand in stark contrast to the austere, emotionless ideal of marriage promoted for the average citizen. It shows that even in the most disciplined society on earth, human desires and ambitions could not be entirely suppressed, especially when the stakes were a throne. For you, marriage is about duty. For Ting, it was about dynasty, and that made everything infinitely more complicated. Let's pause our story for a moment and look down from the privileged perch of the Spartan citizenry. Your entire world, your rigorous training, your communal meals, your strange marital customs, all of it is built on a vast, unseen foundation. That foundation is the helots. The helots were not slaves in the typical sense of private property. They were a subjugated population, a group of Messenians and Laconians who had been conquered by the Spartans centuries ago. They were bound to the land, the Kaelerou, that you and your fellow citizens owned. They were state property, assigned to work the land in turn over a fixed portion of the harvest to their Spartan masters. The surplus, if there was any, they could keep for themselves. They were the engine of the Spartan economy, the silent majority whose labor freed you up to spend your entire life training for war. Their family life was a world away from the bizarre, state-controlled rituals you endure. Helots lived in family units on the land they worked. They had their own homes, humble as they might be. They married amongst themselves, raised their own children, and passed down their own traditions and culture. Their marriages were not secret, nocturnal affairs. Husbands and wives lived together. Fathers were present in their children's lives from the beginning. In many ways, the Helot family probably looked more normal to our modern eyes than a Spartan one. But their existence was one of constant fear and depression. The Spartans, being a tiny ruling class outnumbered by the Helots by perhaps as much as 10 to 1, lived in perpetual dread of a Helot uprising. This fear shaped every aspect of Spartan society, including your own military training. Much of the Agoge was not just about preparing you to fight foreign enemies, but about preparing you to control the domestic one. This brings us to the Cryptii, the secret service or secret affair. This was, and still is, one of the most mysterious and chilling institutions of ancient Sparta. At certain times, the EP whores would secretly declare war on the Helot population. Then, the most promising and cunning young men of the Agoge, those who had proven their worth, would be sent out into the countryside as members of the Cryptii. They would carry only a dagger and a small amount of food. They were to hide during the day and roam the roads at night. Their mission was to kill any Helot they caught out after dark. The purpose of the Cryptii is still debated by historians. Was it a form of secret police, designed to preemptively assassinate potential leaders of a Helot revolt? Was it a brutal final exam for the Agoge? A rite of passage where a young man had to prove he could kill a man in cold blood to become a full citizen? Or was it, as some have argued, a more targeted operation against specific troublemakers rather than random killings? Plutarch, our main source, describes it as a way to terrorize the Helot population and keep them subdued, while also hardening the young Spartan elite. Whatever its exact function, it was an act of state-sponsored terror. Imagine the perspective of a Helot family. You work the land, you produce the food that feeds the city, and in return, you live under the constant threat of arbitrary violence. Your son, out too late trying to retrieve a lost animal, might never come home. Your husband, walking between villages after dark, could disappear without a trace. This constant, low-level terror was a two-love psychological warfare, meant to break the spirit of the Helot people and ensure they never dared to organize. There's also a strange little detail about helot women. Because Spartan women were focused on their physical training and managing the estates, they did not perform many of the tasks that other Greek women did. They didn't do much of the weaving or childcare. Helot women often served as domestic servants and wet nurses in Spartan households. This means that a newborn Spartan baby, after being approved by the elders, was often handed over to a helot wet nurse to be breastfed and cared for in its earliest days. Think about the irony. The Spartan boy, destined to become a master and oppressor, spends his first months of life being nurtured and cared for by a woman from the very population he is being trained to terrorize. It's a bizarre and intimate connection across an unbridgeable social chasm. Did this early bond create any sort of affection or conflict in the young Spartan's mind? The historical record is silent, but it's a poignant reminder of the complex, twisted, and deeply unjust relationships that underpin the whole of Spartan society. Their world was not just black and white, master and slave. It was a network of dependencies and fears, where the family life of the oppressed was both more conventional and infinitely more precarious than that of the oppressors. So, with all this talk of eugenics, wife sharing, and clandestine marriages, a big question hangs in the air. Did anyone in Sparta ever actually fall in love? Was there any room for romance in this society of steel-hard discipline and pragmatism? The official answer, the one the Spartans would have given you, is a firm no. Or at least, not in the way we understand it. The state came first. Duty came first. The production of strong children came first. Personal feelings were a dangerous indulgence, a potential crack in the shield wall of civic unity. The entire social structure, from the Agoge to the separated marriages, was designed to suppress individualism and romantic attachment. When you chose a wife, you weren't looking for a soulmate. You were assessing breeding stock. You looked for health, strength, and a good family lineage. Her personality might have been a secondary consideration. A sharp wit was admired. After all, but it was far down the list. The marriage itself was a contract between two families and the state, not a union of two hearts. The love that was openly celebrated and encouraged in Sparta was not between a man and a woman, but the philia, the deep affection and loyalty between men and a military unit. The bond between you and your mentor in the Agoge, the camaraderie with your messmates in the S3X city, this was the emotional core of your life. These were the relationships that were glorified in song and story. The man's love for his comrades, his willingness to die for the man standing next to him in the phalanx. This was the highest form of love the Spartans recognized. And yet, we're still talking about human beings. Is it really possible to legislate emotion out of existence buried beneath the official ideology? There must have been sparks of genuine affection, tenderness, and love between husbands and wives. We just have to look for them in the cracks. Consider the strange system of separated marriage. The official reason was to keep passions high for procreation and to keep you focused on military life. But could it have had an unintended side effect? Those stolen nocturnal visits, shrouded in secrecy and risk, might have created their own kind of romance. The forbidden nature of the encounters, the longing and anticipation born from enforced separation, could have fostered a powerful bond between you and your wife. It's a relationship built on shared secrets rather than shared days, which can be a potent formula for intimacy. Then there are the stories of the kings, which, despite their political nature, sometimes reveal a glimmer of personal feeling. King Anaxandridas, who defied the EP whores and refused to divorce his barren wife. Choosing bigamy instead, was that just a political calculation? Or was there genuine love and loyalty for the woman he had first married? The sources don't say explicitly, but it's hard not to read a very human emotion into his refusal to cast her aside. Even the laconic, tough as nails reputation of Spartan women sometimes betrays a deeper feeling. The famous line, "Come back with your shield," or on it, is usually interpreted as a sign of brutal patriotism, but it can also be read as an expression of profound, if unsentimental, love. It's a way of saying, I would rather you be dead than dishonored. In a society where honor is everything, wishing for an honorable death for your son over a shameful life is perhaps the ultimate expression of love and respect. One of the most touching, though possibly fictional, anecdotes that has survived concerns a Spartan mother whose son survived a battle where all his comrades had fallen. He ran home, expecting to be praised for surviving. Instead, his mother, filled with shame that her son was the lone survivor, killed him on the spot. It's a horrifying story, but it speaks to an emotional universe where the concepts of love, honor, and duty are fused together in a way that is almost incomprehensible to us. The question of whether Spartans felt romantic love is a classic case of what historians call an argument from silence. We have no Spartan love poems. We have no diaries or letters detailing private affections. Our sources are almost all outsiders or concerned with politics and war. So, did they not write about love because they didn't feel it, or because it was considered inappropriate and trivial? To write about the latter seems more likely. The emotions were probably there, but they were expressed differently, subordinated to the demands of the community. Perhaps the best way to think about it is that love in Sparta was not a foundation for marriage, but a potential and private byproduct of it. You married for duty. You stayed together for duty. You raised children for duty. But somewhere in the quiet moments, in the shared glance across a festival ground, in the silent understanding after a secret nighttime visit, a bond of genuine affection and partnership could grow. It was a tough, resilient kind of love, one that had to survive in the harsh soil of a military state. It wasn't the passionate, dramatic love of Greek tragedies, but it may have been there all the same, quiet and enduring, like the olive trees in the Eurotis Valley. While you and your messmates are busy forging bonds of masculine loyalty, your wife is navigating a social world that is just as complex and competitive. The lives of Spartan women were not a simple story of sisterly solidarity. There was deep friendship, yes, but there was also a powerful undercurrent of rivalry, driven by the same values that shaped the men's world: honor, status, and service to the state. From a young age, your wife was part of a pack, just like you were. Her athletic training wasn't a solitary pursuit. She competed with and against the other girls of her age group. They wrestled each other, raced each other, and threw the discus in formal competitions. These contests, held during religious festivals, were a public spectacle. A girl who excelled earned praise and recognition. She was building her reputation, her Helios fame, just as a young boy was in the Agoge. This instilled a competitive spirit from the very beginning. This spirit of competition didn't end when the training did. It simply shifted arenas. The new competition was about marriage and, most importantly, childbirth. A woman's status in adult society was directly linked to her husband's honor and her own reproductive success. Marrying a respected warrior from a good family was a victory. Bearing him strong, healthy children was the ultimate triumph. Imagine the social pressure. Your wife and her friends, who once competed on the running track, now implicitly compete in the arena of procreation. Whose husband is more distinguished, who was the first to produce a son whose son looks the most promising. These would have been the topics of conversation, the metrics by which they measured themselves and each other. A woman who bore many healthy sons was a champion, lauded by the community. A woman who was barren or only had daughters might feel a sense of failure and shame, a private echo of the public disgrace a childless man faced. But it wasn't all rivalry. There were also powerful bonds of friendship and support. The shared experience of their unique upbringing created a strong sense of group identity. They had all gone through the same rigorous training, the same public exposure. They understood each other's lives in a way no outsider ever could. When your wife went through the strange ritual of her wedding night, the shaved head, The man's cloak, she was supported by her Infocomos and her female friends. They were the ones who guided her through the transition, who understood the fear and the strangeness of it all. This female network was crucial for the day-to-day running of Sparta. While the men were segregated in their barracks and mess halls, the women ran the households and, by extension, the entire agricultural economy. They would have relied on each other for advice, for help, for company. They managed estates, they raised children, and they navigated the complex social roles of their society together. This created a powerful female subculture, with its own leaders, its own traditions, and its own way of enforcing social norms. Here's a small but fascinating detail that hints at their collective life. Choral singing and dancing were a huge part of a Spartan girl's education. These were not just for fun. They performed as a group in religious festivals, singing hymns that praised the gods and celebrated Spartan virtues. These choirs were a way of instilling discipline, coordination, and a sense of collective identity. The famous poet A.L.C. Mann, who lived in Sparta in the 7th century BC, wrote beautiful poems called Partheniai, or maiden songs, to be sung by these choirs. The poems are filled with expressions of affection and admiration between the girls in the choir. They praise each other's beauty, their grace, and their skill. The exact nature of these relationships is, you guessed it, debated by scholars. Some see in these poems evidence of the same kind of institutionalized pederastic relationships that existed between men, a form of mentorship and homoerotic affection between older and younger girls. Others argue it's simply the heightened language of close friendship and group solidarity. Whatever the interpretation, it's clear that deep, emotionally intense bonds were formed between Spartan women. They were each other's primary companions, rivals, and allies in a society that kept them separate from their husbands for so long. So your wife's world is a mix of cooperation and competition. She relies on her female friends for support in a way you rely on your messmates. But at the same time, she is always being measured against them. Is her household as well run? Are her children as strong? Is she upholding the Spartan ideal as well as her neighbor? It was a high-pressure environment where a woman's honor was always on display, judged not just by the men, but perhaps even more keenly by the other women, with husbands and wives living apart for the first decade of marriage, and with men spending their entire lives in the intense, homosocial environment of the military. The question of fidelity and outside relationships naturally arises, and, like everything else in Sparta, the answer is complicated, doesn't fit neatly into our modern categories. Let's start with your situation. For 10 years, you only see your wife during brief, secret, nocturnal visits. The rest of your time, all of it is spent with men. Your deepest emotional bonds are with your mentor and your messmates. The ancient sources are quite clear that these relationships often had an erotic component, particularly in the Agoge. This pederastic relationship between an older mentor and a younger boy was considered a normal and honorable part of a young man's education. What happened to these relationships once you became an adult and got married? Did they just disappear? It's unlikely. The intense bonds of loyalty and affection forged in the barracks would have continued throughout your life. Whether these relationships continued to have an explicitly physical dimension into adulthood is another one of those historical gray areas. Some sources suggest that for a grown man to take on a passive sexual role was considered shameful, that the lines were likely blurry. What is certain is that a man's primary emotional life was centered on other men. In this context, a sexual relationship with a male comrade might not have been seen as infidelity to his wife, because it existed in a completely separate social sphere. It didn't threaten the purpose of the marriage, which was procreation and the management of the Kale arrows. Now, what about the women? Your wife is at home, powerful and independent, but her husband is largely absent. What were the rules for her here? The Spartan attitude seems to be a strange mix of strictness and shocking pragmatism. On the one hand, Adultery in the typical sense, a woman having a clandestine affair for pleasure, was said to be non-existent in Sparta. The writer Plutarch claims that when a foreigner asked a Spartan about the punishment for adultery, the Spartan replied that there were no adulterers in his city. When pressed, he said the penalty would be a bull so large it could stand on one side of Mount Tegedos and drink from the Eurotas river on the other. The foreigner was amazed, and the Spartan explained the fine was impossibly large because the crime was considered impossible. The discipline and virtue of Spartan women were thought to be so absolute that the concept of a secret affair was unthinkable. This is likely an idealized exaggeration, part of the Spartan mirage, the tendency of outside writers to portray Sparta as a perfect, if severe, society. However, it probably reflects a social reality where the penalty for a woman caught in a secret, unauthorized affair would have been incredibly severe, a mark of absolute dishonor for her and her family. But this is where the pragmatism comes in. Remember the practice of wife sharing for procreation. If your wife had a child with another man with your full consent and knowledge, for the good of the state, that wasn't adultery. That was civic duty. It was a public, sanctioned act, not a private, shameful one. The key difference was permission and purpose. An affair for personal pleasure was a crime. A partnership for procreation was a public good. This leads to one of the most famous and scandalous stories about Spartan women's freedom. We've already mentioned the Athenian general Alcibiades and his alleged affair with King Aegis's wife, Timaea. Whether it was true or not, the fact that the story was believable to other Greeks says a lot. It suggests that the idea of a Spartan queen, left alone for long periods while her husband was on campaign, taking a lover, was not entirely outside the realm of possibility. The context here is crucial. Aegis was away for months, even years at a time, and normal social controls were absent. This raises a fascinating question historians still ponder. Did the long absences of husbands on military campaigns create a practical loophole in the otherwise strict rules of fidelity? If a man was gone for years, and his wife took a lover, who was to know as long as she continued to manage the estate properly, and any resulting children could plausibly be claimed by the returning husband, it's possible that society might have, unofficially, looked the other way. This is pure speculation, as no Spartan would ever admit to such a thing, but it's a reminder that even the most rigid societies have their hidden complexities and human realities. So, the concept of cheating in Sparta is tricky. A sexual relationship with another man wasn't necessarily cheating. A sexual relationship with another man's wife to produce an heir wasn't cheating. It was all about context, permission, and, above all, whether the act served or subverted the interests of the state. Private desire was the enemy. Public utility was the goal. It was a moral universe with a completely different compass than our own. In a society that so famously rejected luxury, what was considered beautiful? What were the aesthetic standards for men and women in Sparta? As you can probably guess, it had nothing to do with fancy clothes, expensive perfumes, or elaborate jewelry. In Sparta, beauty was a direct reflection of function. For a man, the ideal of beauty was the body of a perfect warrior. It was about thin skin, lean muscle, and the visible signs of physical hardship. The pale, soft body was a sign of an indoor life, of indulgence and laziness, things utterly despised by Spartan culture. Your body was your resume. The scars from training or battle were not blemishes, they were marks of honor. The calloused hands, the toned physique from endless drills, this was the peak of male attractiveness. Your long hair, which you grew out upon graduating from the Agoge, was a key part of this aesthetic. To the Spartans, long hair was a symbol of a free man, a warrior. It was said that the lawgiver Lycurgus believed it made handsome men more handsome and ugly men more terrifying to the enemy. Before a battle, you and your comrades would engage in a surprising ritual. You would carefully comb and dress your long hair. To an outsider, it might have looked vain, but to you, it was a moment of calm preparation. a declaration that you were so confident in the coming victory that you had time for grooming. It was a psychological weapon. Your clothing was brutally simple. A single crimson cloak, the foe in case, was your uniform in battle. It was practical and intimidating. The color red was chosen, supposedly, because it would not show the stains of blood your enemies or your own. It was a symbol of your profession. There was no room for personal expression in your attire. You dressed as a Spartan, a part of the whole. For women, the aesthetic ideal was much the same: health, strength, and naturalness. A beautiful woman was one who looked fit, strong, and capable of bearing strong children. She had a healthy glow from her outdoor exercises. Her muscles were toned from wrestling and running, and she moved with an athlete's grace. The Athenian ideal of a pale, delicate, sheltered woman would have been seen as sickly and unattractive in Sparta. Your wife's clothing reflected this. A simple peplos, the tunic that earned them the Thyshar nickname, was designed for movement and practicality, not for concealment or elaborate display. They used no cosmetics, no powders to whiten the skin, no rouge for the cheeks, no kohl for the eyes. Such things were seen as deceptive and artificial, an attempt to hide one's true nature. A Spartan woman's beauty was supposed to be honest and unadorned. This rejection of adornment was enshrined in law. Lycurgus was said to have forbidden the use of any elaborate tools or techniques in building a house. A man could only use an axe for the roof and a saw for the doors. The result was a city of simple, functional buildings. This same principle applied to the body. Here's a quirky detail that illustrates their attitude perfectly: Spartan mirrors. In the rest of the Greek world, wealthy women owned beautifully crafted, highly polished bronze mirrors, often with ornate handles. These were symbols of status and femininity. Archaeologists have found very few of these in Laconia. The mirrors that have been discovered are typically small, simple, and unadorned. Some scholars suggest that Spartan women simply didn't spend much time looking at their own reflections. Their value was not in their appearance, but in their actions and their physical fitness. They were too busy running and throwing javelins to worry about their hair. This brings up an interesting debate among historians. Was this austerity a genuine, deeply held philosophical choice, or was it born of necessity? Sparta was not a particularly wealthy state in terms of liquid assets. Its economy was based on agriculture, not trade. Did they reject luxury because they truly believed it was corrupting, or did they make a virtue out of the fact that they couldn't afford it anyway? It's a bit of a chicken and egg question. The official Spartan ideology, of course, would claim it was a moral choice, but it's hard to ignore the economic reality that underpinned it. So, in Sparta, you are surrounded by a very specific kind of beauty. It's the beauty of a well-oiled machine, of a perfectly functional tool. It's seen in the synchronized movement of the phalanx, in the effortless arc of a discus, in the lean, sun-darkened bodies of its men and women. It is a beauty that is earned through sweat and discipline, not bought with money. It is honest, stark, and, in its own way, incredibly intimidating. In a society so overwhelmingly focused on procreation, where a woman's highest honor was dying in childbirth and a man's greatest contribution was a healthy son, you would think that the concepts of birth control or abortion would be completely off the table. And for the most part, you'd be right. The entire system was geared towards maximizing the production of desirable children. However, the reality of human life is always more complicated than state ideology. People have always sought ways to control their reproductive lives, for a variety of reasons. Did this happen in Sparta? The historical record is almost completely silent on the matter, which makes it one of the most speculative and fascinating areas of Spartan social history. Let's consider the possibilities. Did Spartan women have access to contraceptive methods throughout the ancient world? People used a variety of techniques, with wildly varying degrees of effectiveness. These included barrier methods like wads of wool soaked in honey or oil, potions made from herbs, and engaging in certain practices believed to prevent conception. The most famous and likely effective contraceptive plant in the ancient Mediterranean was silphium, a plant that grew only in a small region of North Africa and was so valuable that it was harvested to extinction. While Spartans were generally isolated, it's not impossible that knowledge of such herbal remedies existed. However, any deliberate attempt to prevent pregnancy would have been seen as a profound betrayal of a woman's duty. It would be an act of rebellion against the state, withholding from it the warriors it needed. A woman caught trying to prevent conception would likely have faced severe social condemnation, if not formal punishment. The question of abortion is even murkier. Abortion was practiced in other parts of the Greek world, though its moral and legal status varied. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle even discussed it in their works on ideal states, sometimes condoning it as a tool for population control. But in Sparta, where every potential citizen was a precious asset, the idea seems abhorrent to their core values. But what if a pregnancy was inconvenient or dangerous for the state itself? Imagine a scenario where a woman became pregnant through an illicit, dishonorable affair. Or what if the father was a helot, the foreigner, or a man who had lost his citizenship? The child from such a union would be a social problem, a stain on the family's honor. In such a case, would a secret abortion have been seen as the lesser of two evils? It's possible. The family might have taken matters into their own hands to avoid a greater public shame. This is where we enter the realm of pure historical deduction. We have no direct evidence of abortion being practiced in Sparta, no laws mentioning it, no accounts from writers. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. The very secrecy that would surround such an act makes it unlikely to ever appear in the official record. This is a topic where historians are truly fumbling in the dark. The academic debate here is less of a debate and more of a collective shrug. Some scholars argue that, given the Spartan obsession with producing citizens, any form of birth control or abortion would have been ruthlessly suppressed and therefore practically non-existent. Others suggest that we should never underestimate human agency. Women, even in the most rigid societies, find ways to exert control over their own bodies. It is plausible that an underground knowledge of herbal abortifacients existed, shared secretly among the women, to be used only in the most desperate of circumstances. A related and equally mysterious question is infanticide. We know about the state-sanctioned practice of exposing unfit infants at the Apio the Te, but that was a public act, a decision made by the elders. What about private infanticide? What if the child was born healthy, but was the product of a shameful union? Or what if a family simply couldn't afford another mouth to feed? Despite the land-grant system again, this would be a deeply shameful secret, a private tragedy hidden from the state. There's a strange and little-known law attributed to Lycurgus that might hint at these hidden pressures. The law stated that a dowry was not required for a Spartan bride. The supposed reason was to ensure that no girl would go unmarried because her family was too poor, and no man would choose a wife for her money. The goal was to make sure every healthy woman was married and producing children. While this sounds noble, it might also point to an underlying economic anxiety. If families were struggling to provide dowries, it suggests that not everyone was thriving under the Spartan system, and economic pressure is a classic driver for families wanting to limit their size. Ultimately, we are left with more questions than answers. The official ideology of Sparta was relentlessly prone at a list, but the private lives of its citizens may have been a different story. The pressure to produce the right kind of children may have been so intense that it paradoxically created a need to eliminate the wrong kind, through secret and desperate measures that the state could never acknowledge. It's a stark reminder that behind the monolithic image of Sparta, there were individual human beings grappling with complex, personal, and sometimes tragic choices. Life in Sparta wasn't all grim-faced training and clandestine marriages. There were moments when the relentless pressure was eased, when the community came together not for war or discipline, But for celebration, the most important of these were the religious festivals. And for you, the grandest of them all was the Karni. The Karni was a 9-day festival held in the late summer, around August or September. It was dedicated to Apollo Karnios, a deity who was a fusion of the great god Apollo and an older, local ram-headed god named Karnios. This festival was so sacred, so vitally important, that it could literally stop the Spartan army in its tracks. The most famous example of this was in 490 BC, when the Athenians sent a runner to Sparta asking for help against the invading Persians. The Spartans agreed to help, but replied that they could not march until the Karni was over and the full moon had passed. By the time they arrived, the Battle of Marathon had already been won by the Athenians. To a Spartan, offending the gods was a far greater risk than letting an ally down. During these 9 days, a sacred truce was declared. All military activities ceased. You put down your spear, left the barracks, and for a brief period, lived a different life. The festival was a complex blend of solemn religious rites, joyful celebrations, and strange, ancient rituals that hark back to Sparta's earliest days. One of the central features of the festival was the construction of several shelters, or skiades, which looked like lean-to tents. 9 men would live in each of these shelters for the duration of the festival, eating together and living under a kind of military discipline, all in honor of the god. It was like a temporary, holy version of your SYS Sidian, a blending of your military and religious life. But the most famous and bizarre event of the Karni was a ritual chase. The man, chosen to be the quarry, would first pray to the gods for the good of the city. Then, on a signal, he would start running. A group of young, unmarried men, known as the Staphylodroma or Great Cluster Runners, would then chase him. If they caught him, it was considered a good omen for Sparta for the coming year. If he escaped, it was a bad omen. Imagine the scene: the hot summer sun, the dusty ground, the whole community watching as this single man runs for his life, pursued by a pack of the city's fittest young men. It was a serious affair, a moment of real, communal anxiety. The fate of the city for the next year seemed to hang on the outcome of the strange, ritualized hunt. The origins of this ritual are lost to time, but historians speculate it could be a symbolic reenactment of an ancient hunt, or perhaps a purification ritual for the city. The Karni was also a time of music and performance. While Spartans were famously laconic, they had a deep appreciation for music, especially when it served a civic or religious purpose. The festival would have featured musical contests, with poets and musicians competing for prizes. Great choral performances, with choirs of men and boys singing hymns to Apollo, would have echoed through the valley. It was a rare chance for artistic expression in a society that valued utility above all else. And what about the women? While many of the main rituals, like the chase and the communal dining, were for men, women had their own crucial roles in their own celebrations. They would have participated in their own choral dances and religious rites, separate from the men. Festivals were one of the few times that young, unmarried men and women could see each other in a relaxed, celebratory atmosphere. It was at events like the Karni or the similar festival of the Yak in Thea that you might have first laid eyes on your future wife. It was a state-sanctioned opportunity for mingling, a brief window where the rigid segregation of the sexes was temporarily eased. One little-known aspect of Spartan festivals is the role of humor and mockery. Alongside the solemn prayers and hymns, there was also room for ritualized jesting and public teasing. People might sing songs that made fun of certain citizens or poked fun at authority figures. This wasn't just random heckling, it was a structured part of the festival, a way to let off social steam in a controlled environment. By allowing for a period of licensed disrespect, the society could then return to its usual state of rigid discipline. It was a safety valve. The Karni I offered you a brief respite from the crushing weight of being a Spartan warrior. It was a time to connect with your gods, your community, and perhaps even your own family in a way that your daily life forbade. For 9 days, the air was filled not with the clang of weapons, but with music and prayer. But as the festival ended and the last echoes of the hymns faded, you would pick up your shield and spear again. The truce was over. The normal, harsh reality of Spartan life would resume, but you would return to it refreshed, your faith in the gods reaffirmed, and the omens for the year hopefully good. The day you turn 30 is a quiet but monumental milestone. There's no grand ceremony, but it marks a fundamental shift in your life. After 13 years in the Agoge and another 10 living full-time in the barracks, you are finally, officially, allowed to go home. You can now live with your wife and children. You pack your few belongings, your cloak, your weapons, your comb for your long hair and walk out of the barracks that has been your only real home since you were 7. You are walking towards a life you've only ever experienced in stolen, nocturnal moments. You are about to become a husband and a father in the daylight. Stepping into your own home is a strange experience. This is the house, then the kale arrows, that your wife has been managing for a decade. She knows its every secret, every leaky roof tile, every stubborn helot. You, on the other hand, are a stranger in your own domain. You must learn the rhythms of a household, a world away from the rigid timetables of the military. You will see your children in the daylight, perhaps for the first time on a consistent basis. They are not babies anymore. They are young children, raised by their mother, who see you as this imposing, unfamiliar figure who has suddenly appeared at the breakfast table. But don't think for a moment that this is retirement. You are not settling down to become a gentleman farmer. Your primary duty remains the same. You are a soldier of Sparta. You are now a member of the frontline army, the backbone of the phalanx. You must continue to train every day, maintaining your peak physical condition. And most importantly, you still have to take your main meal, the evening dinner, at your SYS sit-in. So, even though you live at home, your life is still centered around the mess hall. Every evening, you leave your wife and children and join your 15 comrades for black broth and military banter. This ensures that your primary loyalty remains with your unit, not your family. The state still has its hooks in you, refusing to let the softening influence of domestic life take complete hold. Your life now becomes a balancing act. You have responsibilities at home. Your estate must be managed, though your wife likely still does the heavy lifting. Then you have a role as a father. You are expected to be a stern, disciplined role model for your children. Your son, when he turns 7, will be taken from you and put into the Agoge, just as you were. You are expected to show no sadness, only pride. You are perpetuating the system that shaped you. This is the period when you are most likely to see active military service. Sparta was almost constantly engaged in warfare, either against foreign powers like Athens or Persia, or in suppressing helot revolts at home. A summons to war could come at any time. You would grab your shield and spear, say a brief, unsentimental farewell to your family, and march off with your messmates. Your wife's parting words with it, Oronic, would ring in your ears. A fascinating and often overlooked detail of Spartan military life is their attitude towards booty. After a successful battle, soldiers would collect spoils from the enemy. In other armies, this was a chance for a soldier to get rich. But in Sparta, all booty was collected and belonged to the state. It was then redistributed, but not always equally. This was one of the few ways a Spartan could accumulate a bit of personal wealth. This system is another one of those historical puzzles. How did this practice of unequal distribution of spoils square with their official ideology of equality and austerity? Some historians argue that it created a hidden class system within the peers, where some men were significantly wealthier than others, further straining the myth of the homo ioi. So, your 30s and 40s are the prime of your life. You are a full citizen, a frontline warrior, a husband, and a father. You have a foot into worlds, the domestic sphere of your home and the military sphere of the training ground and the mess hall. It's a life of dual obligations. You are expected to be a master in your own house, but your real masters are still the state and the unwritten laws of Spartan society. You finally have a home, but your true family remains the 15 men you share your evening meal with. You have achieved the Spartan ideal, but that ideal demands your constant, unwavering service until the day you can no longer lift a shield. What happened when a Spartan marriage, this pragmatic contract designed for procreation, simply didn't work even in a society that suppressed personal emotion, conflict, incompatibility, or a simple failure to produce heirs could lead to the end of a union? The Spartan approach to divorce was, predictably, practical and relatively straightforward, free from the moral stigma it held in other societies. Divorce in Sparta was a recognized and seemingly simple process. It could be initiated by either the husband or the wife, which was another radical departure from the norms of the Greek world. In Athens, a woman could only request a divorce with great difficulty, requiring the support of her male relatives to represent her. In Sparta, your wife could, in theory, decide to end the marriage herself. The most common and accepted reason for divorce was, of course, barrenness. If a couple could not produce children after a reasonable amount of time, it was almost expected that they would dissolve the union to allow both partners to find more fertile matches. This wasn't seen as a personal failure so much as a practical problem that needed a practical solution. The state needed children, and a childless marriage was a drain on resources. Consider the case of King Clemens I, the son of the bigamous king Anaxandrid, as Clemens himself had only one child, a daughter named Gorgo, the future wife of Leonidas. He had no male heir. According to some accounts, he divorced his first wife in order to marry another, in the hopes of producing a son to secure his line. It didn't work. He still had no more children, but it shows that divorce was a tool available, even at the highest levels, to solve a succession crisis. When a marriage ended, the arrangements were quite simple. The wife would take her dowry with her. This was a crucial piece of financial security for women. Since the dowry remained her property throughout the marriage, she was not left destitute upon its dissolution. She could return to her father's home or, more likely, arrange a new marriage, bringing her property with her into the new union. The children, however, were another matter. This is where the state's interest became paramount. Children were not considered the property of the parents, but assets of Sparta. Custody arrangements as we know them didn't exist. A child's future was determined by the state. A son would enter the Agoge at 7, regardless of his parents' marital status. The father remained responsible for his son's contribution to the mess hall later in life. The children's connection was to the state, not to a specific marital household. Because the purpose of marriage was so functional, and because romantic love was not its basis. Both divorce and remarriage were common and carried little to no shame. A woman who had proven her fertility in a first marriage was a highly desirable partner for a second. A man who divorced his barren wife was simply doing his duty by seeking a new partner to create citizens. It was all very logical. One of the most peculiar and illustrative stories about Spartan divorce and remarriage involves the great king Agesilaus, who had deposed his nephew Leo Tich-Ed as over rumors of his parentage. Agesilaus had a beautiful and beloved sister, Niska. She was married to a man, but the couple was childless. Agesilaus, eager to see his sister produce heirs for his family line, reportedly persuaded her to divorce her husband and marry another man. This story, if true, shows how family and dynastic ambitions could doctor marital decisions. But here's a wonderfully weird and little-known fact about Niska. She was just a king's sister used as a political pawn. She was an incredibly wealthy and ambitious woman in her own right. since women were not allowed to compete in the Olympic Games themselves. KY Niska used her vast wealth to do the next best thing. She owned and bred a team of horses. She entered her chariot team in the Olympics and won the 4-horse chariot race not once, but twice, since the victory prize was awarded to the owner, not the driver. KY Niska became the first woman in history to be listed as an Olympic victor. She even erected statues of herself at Olympia to commemorate her victories. This story adds another layer of complexity to our understanding of Spartan women. KY Niska's life shows the intersection of marriage, divorce, wealth, and personal ambition. She was part of the royal family's dynastic games, but she was also a trailblazing public figure, using the economic power available to Spartan women to achieve a level of fame and glory that was unheard of for a female in the Greek world. The debate among historians here is about the emotional reality. Was divorce really as clean and unemotional as the sources suggest, or was there heartbreak, jealousy, and bitterness? Just as there is in any human separation, the Spartan code demanded that such feelings be suppressed, but it's hard to believe they didn't exist. A man and a woman who had lived together, even in Sparta's strange fashion, and perhaps raised children, would surely have formed some kind of bond. The dissolution of that bond, for whatever practical reason, must have had an emotional cost. But like so much of Spartan personal life, that cost was a private debt, never to be publicly acknowledged. The years of front-line service eventually come to an end. At the age of 60, you are officially discharged from the army. You have served your time. You have fought Sparta's battles, endured decades of discipline, and contributed to the state in every way demanded of you. For the first time since you were 7 years old, you are a free man, no longer under the direct command of a military superior. But retirement in Sparta doesn't mean a quiet life of leisure, tending to your olive groves. A Spartan's duty to the state only ends with death. Your 61st year marks your eligibility for the highest honor a man can achieve in his lifetime, election to the Geras-II, the Council of Elders. The Geras-II was the supreme court and the most powerful political body in Sparta. It consisted of 30 members, the 2 kings, who were members by right, and 28 other men, all over the age of 60. These were lifetime appointments. Once elected, you served until you died. This council had immense power. They could propose laws, veto proposals from the popular assembly, and, most importantly, they served as the court for capital crimes, with the power to sentence even a king to death or exile. To be one of the 28 was to be at the absolute pinnacle of Spartan society. The election process for the Geras-II was one of the strangest and, to other Greeks, most laughable political spectacles in the ancient world. Aristotle described it as childish. When a seat on the council became vacant due to a member's death, all eligible men over 60 who wished to be considered would present themselves as candidates. The election took place in the main assembly of citizens. The candidates would walk one by one in a predetermined order through the assembly hall, in complete silence. Meanwhile, a group of judges was sequestered in a nearby building, out of sight. They could not see the candidates. They could only hear the reaction of the crowd. As each candidate passed, the crowd would shout and applaud. The judge's job was to listen to the volume of the shouting for each man. The candidate who received the loudest and most sustained applause was declared the winner. Think about the absurdity. The most powerful office in the state was awarded based on a shouting contest, a clapometer. It was a primitive, subjective system, wide open to manipulation. A candidate with a large family or many friends in the crowd had a distinct advantage, and yet, this was how Sparta chose its most venerated leaders. Why such a strange system? Historians speculate that it was a holdover from a much earlier, pre-literate time, a kind of tribal acclamation that was never updated. It also placed a huge emphasis on a man's public reputation. To be elected to the Geras-II, you had to be not just a great warrior, but a man universally respected and admired throughout his life. You had to be a model of Spartan virtue, a man whose very presence commanded a roar of approval from the people. If you are elected, your life changes again. You spend your days deliberating on the most important matters of state. You are now the guardian of the laws of Lycurgus, the final arbiter of justice. Your word is law. The teasing and testing you endured as a youth in the S3X Scythian are now replaced by the grave respect due to an elder statesman. But what if you aren't elected? Most men weren't. The 28 seats didn't open up very often. If you don't make it onto the council, your old age is one of respected retirement. You are an elder, a veteran. You are exempt from military service, but you are not exempt from your duty to the community. You are a living repository of Spartan tradition. You might spend your days at the public training grounds, watching the next generation of boys in the Agoge, offering advice, criticism, and stories of your own time. You are now one of the grim-faced old men who once inspected babies at the Lesche, your life having come full circle. There's a small, poignant detail about Spartan old age related to burial. We mentioned that only men who died in battle and women who died in childbirth earned a named gravestone. Everyone else was buried in an unmarked grave. This meant that even a great king or a revered member of the Geras II, if he died peacefully of old age, would be laid to rest with no personal marker. This was the ultimate expression of Spartan collectivism. In the end, your individual identity was subsumed back into the state. Your legacy was not your name on a stone, but the continuing strength of the city you had served your whole life. Your relationship with your wife also enters a new phase. You are now both at home, full-time, for the first time in your lives. After a lifetime of separation and stolen moments, you are now companions in old age. What was this final chapter like? Did the years of distance create a permanent emotional gulf? Or did they find a quiet, comfortable rhythm together? Two veterans sharing the peace after a long war as with so much else. The inner life of a Spartan couple in their twilight years is a story lost to time. After a lifetime of rigid discipline, it's easy to imagine you and your fellow Spartans as grim, humorless robots. But that's not the full picture. Spartans had a very specific and very famous sense of humor. It was just as sharp, economical, and brutal as everything else in their culture. We call it laconic wit, and it was another weapon in their arsenal. This style of speaking, which you learned as a boy in the Agoge by having your thumb bitten, was a mark of intellectual discipline. It was the art of saying the most with the fewest possible words. A long-winded speech was seen as a sign of a weak, muddled mind. A perfect, pithy comeback was a sign of intelligence and self-control. Many of these famous laconic phrases have come down to us through writers like Plutarch. They are like ancient one-liners, and they give us a glimpse into the Spartan mindset. When Philip of Macedon, Alexander the Great's father, was conquering Greece, he sent a threatening message to Sparta. It said, "You are advised to submit without further delay, for if I bring my army into your land, I will destroy your farms, slay your people, and raze your city." The Spartan EP horse sent back a reply of a single word "if." The sheer arrogance and confidence packed into that one word is breathtaking. It's the ultimate verbal shrug. It's a masterclass in psychological warfare, belittling a massive threat with contemptuous brevity. Another famous example came during the Persian invasion under Xerxes. A man from Trachis, trying to intimidate the Spartans, told them that the Persian arrows would be so numerous they would block out the sun. The Spartan Denix, who was later killed at Thermopylae, simply replied, "Good, then we will have our battle in the shade." It's a perfect fusion of humor and courage, turning a terrifying image into a joke about personal comfort. What about their private conversations? What was pillow talk like between a Spartan husband and wife again? We can only guess, but it was likely just as direct and unsentimental. There wouldn't be much room for flowery compliments or sweet nothings. The communication will be practical, focused on the household, the children, and the affairs of the community. But humor would have certainly played a part. The same sharp wit that was prized in public would have been present at home. Teasing was a fundamental part of Spartan education and social life. A husband and wife who had known each other their whole lives, who had grown up in the same high-pressure system, would have shared a common language of inside jokes and pointed observations. We can see this in the famous sayings attributed to Spartan women. They are just as sharp as the men's. Would a woman from Attica, preening about her expensive, patterned textiles, said to Gorgo, "Look at the quality of my weaving." Gorgo's reply was devastatingly blunt, "It's nice, but it wouldn't fetch a high price." She was implying the Athenian woman looked like a prostitute. It's a cutting, status-deflating remark, delivered with laconic precision. This wit was also a tool for education within the family. A father might use a sharp, witty saying to teach his son a lesson, a phrase that would stick in the boy's mind far better than a long lecture. A mother might use a dry, humorous comment to praise or correct her daughter. A little-known aspect of this is that Spartans were reportedly fond of riddles and proverbs. This makes sense. A good riddle requires concise language and clever thinking, the very skills prized by laconic culture. It's a form of intellectual play that fits perfectly within their worldview. Sharing riddles around the hearth in the evening might have been a common family pastime, a way to sharpen the mind while relaxing. But did this directness leave any room for tenderness? This is the central, unanswerable question. Is it possible to express affection and care through this kind of communication? Perhaps it is. A sharp, teasing comment from a wife might be her way of showing she's paying attention, that she cares about her husband's conduct. A husband's brief, practical advice could be his form of expressing concern. The historical debate has risen about whether this wit existed. It clearly did. The debate is about what it tells us about their inner lives. Are we right to interpret this as a sign of emotional suppression, a culture incapable of expressing warmth? Or are we just failing to read a different emotional language? Perhaps for a Spartan, the highest compliment wasn't a declaration of love, but a perfectly timed, witty retort that showed you understood them completely. It was an intellectual intimacy, a meeting of two sharp minds, rather than an outpouring of two hearts. So, as you sit with your wife in your later years, the conversation might not be what we would consider romantic. It would be a spare, efficient exchange. But, in the shared glance, the slight smile after a particularly dry joke, and the comfortable silence between two people who have endured a lifetime together, there might exist a deep and resilient bond, expressed not in many words, but in the perfect, knowing use of a few. We've walked a long and strange road together. We've seen you born and judged, trained in the brutal Agoge, and married off in a secret abduction. We've watched you sneak out of your barracks to visit a wife who held more economic power than any other woman in Greece. We've seen your entire life, your relationships, your body, and your children all dedicated to a single, all-consuming purpose, the strength and survival of the state. Now, as an old man, you can look back and see the results. For centuries, this bizarre and demanding system worked. It created the most feared and disciplined fighting force in the ancient world. Sparta dominated its neighbors, controlled the Peloponnese, and stood as a symbol of military perfection. The system, for all its cruelty and strangeness, achieved its goal. But as you look around in your later years, say around the 4th century BC, you would begin to see the cracks. The number of full Spartan citizens, the homoi, or peers, is shrinking, and it's shrinking at an alarming rate. The very system that was designed to produce an endless supply of warriors was, in fact, slowly strangling the state. Why, the reasons are complex, but many of them are rooted in the very marriage and family customs we've been exploring. Let's connect the dots. First, the land system. Your citizenship depended on your ability to contribute to your mess hall, which depended on the produce from your kale arrows. But these plots of land were not all equal in size or quality, and over generations, They could be divided or lost. If a family had several sons, this single plot of land might not be enough to support all of them as full citizens once they grew up. A man who couldn't pay his dues was demoted. This created a slow but steady drain on the citizen body, a process historians call entropy, or shortage of men. Then there was the growing concentration of wealth in the hands of women. As Aristotle noted, a huge portion of Spartan land came to be owned by a small number of wealthy heiresses. When these heiresses married, their vast estates were combined with their husbands. This meant that more and more land was controlled by fewer and fewer families. Wealthy men might choose to marry an heiress to increase their own fortune, rather than marrying a poor but healthy girl who might produce more children. The rich got richer and had fewer children, while the poor lost their land and their citizen status. The Spartan obsession with physical perfection also played a role. The practice of inspecting infants and the relentless pressure to produce only the best stock may have led to a system that was too selective for its own good. Coupled with the constant losses in warfare, the citizen population was simply not replenishing itself fast enough. And finally, there's the question of the Spartan mindset itself. The system was incredibly rigid. It had been successful for so long that the Spartans became incapable of adapting. When faced with a shrinking population, they didn't reform the land laws or change the rules of citizenship. They just doubled down on the old ways, the traditions of Lycurgus. Their greatest strength, their discipline and resistance to change became their fatal weakness. The debate among historians continues to rage. What was the primary cause of Sparta's decline? Was it the economic pressure of the Kale-Eros system? Was it the concentration of wealth in the hands of women? Was it the constant warfare and the failure to reform their political system? Was it something in the very nature of the Spartan family, a system so focused on quality that it failed to produce quantity? The most likely answer is that it was all of these things. A slow-burning crisis caused by the complex interaction of their unique social, economic, and military institutions. As you sit on your porch, watching your grandson train, you might feel a sense of pride in the continuity of it all, but you might also feel a quiet, unspoken anxiety. There are fewer red cloaks in the phalanx now. The mess halls are not as full as they were in your youth. The great machine of Sparta, which had seemed so eternal and unbreakable, is beginning to slow down. The very customs that defined your life, that gave it meaning on purpose, were also the seeds of its eventual demise. Your world was built to last forever, but it was built on a foundation that was slowly, imperceptibly, washing away. And so, our journey through the strange world of Spartan life comes to a close. You have lived a life that is almost unimaginable to us now, a life of service, of discipline, of secrets kept in the dark and honor displayed in the sun. The world you inhabited has long since faded into dust and memory, leaving behind only whispers and fragments of stories. Perhaps now, as you lie there, feeling the weight of your own comfortable bed, you can feel the edges of your own reality begin to blur. The soft hum of the fan might sound like the wind sighing through the olive groves of the Eurotis Valley. The darkness of your room might feel like the quiet, secret darkness of a Spartan night. You can feel the day release its hold on you, letting you drift away from the world of deadlines and duties, into the timeless, formless world of sleep. You are no longer in your room. You are floating in a gentle current, a river of quiet thoughts and fading images, carrying you peacefully toward the shores of your own dreams. There is nothing left to do now, nothing to figure out, just the simple, easy act of letting go. The end of the article. Good night.